So then we're going to start to this symposium called Visualizing Contemporary Urbanscapes. This is the fourth event of the summer school called Planetary Urbanization that is organized by the Academy of Global Humanities and Political Theory. And first of all, as the organizer of this event, we want to thank a lot the Gymnasio who is hosting us tonight. So thanks a lot for this beautiful place that is hosting this event. And we want also to say thanks to the Fondazione Gramsci who is supporting the event, to the Comune di Bologna, to the Fondazione per l'innovazione urbana, to the Centro Internazionale di Studi Umanistici Umberto Eco, to Baumhaus and Jack and Charlie, who are going to present some of the works they have do within the summer school, to Unipol e Civiltà metropolitana di Bologna. And of course, thanks a lot for our hosts. Easterling. She's an architect, a writer and a professor at Yale, and she's currently working on global infrastructure as a medium of polity. Thanks to Lapini, who is a Bologna-based Italian freelance photographer. Thanks to Neilson, who is a research professor at the Institute for Culture and Society of Western Sydney University. Whose research and writings aims to provide alternative ways of conceiving globalization. Thanks to Simone, who is an urbanist with especially interest in spatial and social compositions of urban regions, and he's a research associate at the Max Planck Institute for the Study of Religious and Ethnic Diversity. And thanks to the workshop The City, a workshop that has been organized within the summer school Planetary Urbanscapes. So just a couple of concepts, just a couple of ideas to introduce tonight's event. The name of the event is somehow a provocative one. Why provocative? Because visualizing today means referring to a crisis. The crisis of what has been called ocular centricity, the concept that the rational power of the eye had come to dominate the nature and scope of our interactions. In recent decades, scholars have often argued that the rise in visual certitude and corresponding charges of the totalizing power of vision were coincident with the advent of modernity. And it is remarkable to say that privileging sighting rather than hearing, touching, tasting, or smelling has had a quite crucial political implication also for the state-building processes. In the ways in which they organize territoriality, transform cities, develop disciplines and techniques, above all, feed to the technology of man. However, a groundbreaking stream of research is presenting a strikingly different story. Stuart Clark, in the book Vanities of the Eye, claims that intellectual experience during the early modern European culture was marked not by ocular hegemony, but by an intense visual crisis. In effect, the act of looking was perceived by viewers as almost never straightforward and rarely to be trusted. This early modern crisis of confidence in the eye was all the more severe for its participants because it occurred within a paradigm dominated by vision. I think that today we are confronted with a quite analogous problematic. Rather than ocular centricity, I think there is a need for an ocular eccentricity as an alternative mode of visual engagement. Trying to change our consolidated lenses is a crucial critical exercise, and one way I would like to propose is to start trying to see like a city rather than seeing like a state, to quote a quite famous book. However, the very concept of the city itself today is is in crisis. A few decades ago, with the first satellite, the dream of Babylon seemed to be achieved. The dream of seeing from the top to know everything about Earth's surface. The vision of God, the zenithal vision. But when the satellite started to send on Earth the first images taken from aeronautical space, it was an epistemic trauma. An epistemic trauma for urbanists, cartographers, and so on and so forth. Basically, the city was not recognizable anymore as a specific form. It resulted without clear boundaries, and it was spread everywhere. The annihilation of space through time, envisaged by Karl Marx, the war market, the global chains of value, the self-building of cities by migrant people, literally exploded the city. Therefore, today, there is a need to search for alternative ways to capture contemporary urbanscapes, to search for blind spots, to assume that the global has entered in the city and that the city has covered the whole Earth's surface. What is at stake is an epistemological, theoretical, and also very concrete question. What are the most productive gazes to interpret contemporary urbanscapes? Their continuous deformation, their continuous débordement, their enduring transformations. So these are like the questions that we elaborate to introduce this symposium. And I asked to all the presenters to discuss their own ways to their own strategies to visualize contemporary urbanscape. So I don't know who wants to start. Please.
Hi, hello. My name is Anna Romani. I'm part of Baumhaus, which is a social cooperative that lives in Bologna. I would like to thank you all for inviting us here. It's a great opportunity. We're not used to stand behind tables and talk in front of people usually, so forgive our emotion maybe. So thank you, Nicola. I would like to briefly introduce what we have been doing in the last days, in the last 2 weeks in Bologna, together with Michele Lapini and Charlie, and together with the students, the participants in the summer school. Our workshop is called The City and the City. It has been a workshop that lasts like 6 days. And we have been wandering around the suburb and working at Checkpoint Charlie. They will explain later what we have been doing. I would like to, we're not academics, so I would like maybe to explain why we are here today and we were asked to conduct these workshops. We are, as Baumhaus, educational designer and activists. We work with teenagers, usually. And to work with teenagers, it has a lot to do with visual culture, and what we do every day is try to work with quality education and make education pop. So what we did when we designed this workshop was we designed it with the same idea, to put together a theoretical approach, but mainly a practical approach, an artistic approach, a creative approach. So it was more of an urban exploration, and we had a hypothesis that was that La Bologna, the suburb where we work and where we live, it's everything and its opposite. So the narrative of the suburb, it really depends on who describes it. And I think we were asked to participate in the summer school because we have been working there for 10 years, and we could, maybe give a different angle, a different perspective on the city of Bologna. I don't know if you've talked about the city of Bologna during these 2 weeks, but what we did was, observing a particular part of the city without telling to the participants where they were and what the places, the streets they were crossing. So I don't want to anticipate what Michele and Ciappo and Xavi are going to say and what we did during the 2 weeks, but I can say that it has been very interesting, and as usual, when you conduct workshops, the most interesting part are the informal and non-formal parts. So the speeches we had during the workshop, when we did the brainstorming, the possibility to talk about what we felt and not just what we thought we were seeing, because that's the thing. What we wanted to do was to create a different approach, a different way of seeing things. It's not just what you have read on books, but what you feel, and to work with associations. So this place remembers another place. What is this place? Where is this place in the world? And then to create an emotional and a sort of perceptive map, and not a theoretical one. So the idea is at the end to have a global suburb, the result of a global suburb that is made of the perception of the people, of music, of literature, because that's what we think it's interesting when you see a place. So I hope I give you a brief introduction to this. I would like to ask Michele to say something about what he did during the days, and thank you again. It's a pleasure to be here, and okay, whatever. Go, Michele.
Hi everyone, I'm Lapini, and I'm a photojournalist. I took part during the workshop with Ciappo and Charlie and Baumhaus. During the first 2 days we were working around the Bologna for just to discover the district. We brought the students around the district without explaining them where they were, because our final purpose was to let them exploring and experience the district without any specific geographic, either political or social preconception or information. And then let's go to reflect upon suburbs, urban center, and the district where we were working. Indeed, we do believe that notions such as suburbs, urban center, requalification, and others depends both on personal perspective and sensation, but also on mainstream input and influence. So we worked first with old photos to recognize the urban change, and how they affect the urban landscape. As the photos are going there, we try to photograph the same place, and with the old photo we find in archive and everything. With the new one, the students took the photos and they recognized the place. We try to photograph change and those places where the students could grasp the coexistence and contrast between the old and the new. As for example, Trilogia Navire, this is just in the border between the new Bologna and the old Bologna. It's a place where the contrast is very strong. Or other example is the new station, the high velocity train station in Via Carraccio, is just at the beginning of the district between Bologna and the city center. So after this we provide them an empty map of Bologna, and we ask them to show on the map where the Bologna is located compared to the city center. So our proposal was to know, after just a few hours of walking, where the students feel to respect the city center, if it was in the suburb or not. This is what the map. So some of them located Bologna inside the city center, so inside the historical center in the circle, and other located at the real distance. So this was like the representation of suburb depends, as Anna said, on personal perspective, and if you don't say nothing to the people who are working in the district, just some people school that was inside the city center and not in suburbs. So, however, all of them were very surprised to know that Bologna is considered a suburb. So, this was like the first 2 days of the workshop. We tried to photograph the district. First day, respect to the time, so trying to find the contrast and the coexistence with the old and the new. And the second day, we was working in the area of the district where the change are more visible. So the Terrà and Iacarracci, to show how the district are changing. And the other 2 days they went to check. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Gianluca Patrizzi speaking as the Checkpoint Charlie. We work the second week after the first week with medium of photography, and we as Checkpoint Charlie we often work with visual arts, contemporary arts. So we decided to involve guys and girls from the summer school to represent with an installation what we are thinking about the city of Bologna, what we're thinking about the Bologna district. After they took their photographs, they came to Checkpoint Charlie, a natural space where we every day work with different medium to print their photograph. We as screen printers, we use the screen printing in order to reproduce the photograph on layers of plexiglass. Transparency that can play with other kind of layers, as you can see here with us. After a brief introduction on technique, screen printing, that let the guys work with materials and a handmade way to reproduce what they already have seen in the district. We invite them to just use colors, use pencils, use other kind of tools in order to produce interpretations on city, interpretation on the culture of the district, and so on. The game is to add this kind of interpretation in the objects in order to mix and match what they think about Bologna. Just the only guide that we gave to the guys is just the using of 3 different colors and black, the red, the yellow, and the blue, and the light blue. So in order to have an aesthetic that could work with the installation, but also to let them work together, cooperate in order to create a unique object that is going to be worked as a changeable kind of art piece, and make match interpretation of the district. Okay, thank you.
There on the table you can see the first part of the results of what they did, but tomorrow we will be at Fondazione from 7. If you want to come by and see what the rest of the things they did, I would like to ask to the participants to come here and say a few words about their experience, and I would like to thank you again. You can, I don't know. You can see them. So thank you again, and see you soon.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sadiq Taffer. I'm one of the participants here at the Bologna Summer School. Thanks for the invitation to be here, particularly to Bauhaus and the workshop has been for us. It's still in motion. It's not yet complete, but thus far it's been quite a valuable experience. as part of the summer school, we read it really as a critical intervention that responds to what's been described here this evening as a visual crisis. The modern colonial episteme is centered, privileges the visual, which is complicit in the cartographic capture of visual difference, of social difference. So this critical intervention, rather than focusing on a theoretical orientation, as well as privilege method, a critical method which we could think in terms of ocular eccentricity. In terms of this method, we began with urban walking, knowing the city by walking the city, by having our bodies in the space. And we moved rather from seeming like a flaneur to seeming like a migrant. Where knowledge is partial, contingent, always incomplete, always provisional. Where our experience is really located in perceptions of discovery and encounter with the city and with the difference that the community we're exploring represented. We then moved on to, as Nicola had been speaking about, photographic framing, to decenter ourselves and to privilege other sorts of perspectives, which we then took into a studio space. Here we worked with techniques around assemblage and collage, particularly around historical anachronisms to bring original or even conflicting readings between the past and the present. Another point I want to make is the importance of critical locality in this workshop. That it in many ways complements the theoretical orientation of the summer school by situating these knowledges in place, in context, in the city in which these theorizations are taking place, and that's been, I think, invaluable for all of us here. Through engagement with residents, with artists, with activists, situated knowledges on the ground, and experiential and living as well. It brings in the dimension of affect and materiality into our experience here, which was always at once personal and political, working between lived experience and the textuality of the city. And lastly, it's starting to draw correlations between theory and praxis, the relationship between practice and knowledge and experience, which, as I said, has been invaluable and a great complement to the summer school indeed, which both complemented and contested the academic pedagogies and normative frameworks in which we typically work within the academy. I'd let my partner introduce herself and say.
So, hi everyone, I'm Alex Demchak. I'm coming from Rutgers University, and I wanted to thank everyone in Bologna that hosted us over the last week and a half, and just to kind of reflect for a second about, I guess, not everyone participated, so not everyone here had the chance to go, but I encourage you to take a walk, as we did, over to Bologna, just to the north of the city, near the train station. And what we were invited to do was sort of have the opportunity to sense the city and engage with Bologna in a way that I think we didn't necessarily get the chance in all of our workshops and academic engagements in the summer school. And so just wanted to take a minute to try to draw together some threads of the sensing of the urban processes that we experienced, and then bringing it together with the theory that we've been so focused on. And so just this week we're focusing on the urban human with Dr. Simone, and so I just wanted to share some words that he shared with us today. We were introduced introduced to Bologna without orientation, as Sadi mentioned. We didn't know where exactly we were. We were meant to kind of sense it out and feel it out and take on the perspective of somebody who has no relation with the neighborhood. And so we were asked, does this feel like the center or the periphery? And we spent a lot of time in the last 2 weeks talking about what does this periphery mean. And so I just wanted to reflect on a few words we were talking about today: blackness in the city, and the sort of the periphery and the condition of otherness that I think was being evoked with Bologna. And someone says, where the inability of those surveying the city to make clear distinctions as to the constitutive identities and practices of the inhabitants can render that space into black space. And so while this is not an exclusively black neighborhood, there is a productivity of blackness in this space. And so what is the sort of looking at the latency and the latent potentials. So we're in a moment on Saturday, many of us participated in an action that was surrounding the eviction of XM24 squat in Bologna, and so that there's this convergence of sort of subversive politics and claiming space and claiming land and latent potentials that are being pushed back against by the city. And there's also this very vibrant community of migrants. And so I think just to think more in the future, we can welcome the summer school. How can we bring together the theoretical work that we're doing in the classroom with these wonderful artistic and sensorial experiences that we're having in the city? And so I think I would welcome that discussion as we finish up in the next few days for those of you who are participating. I think it would be great. We invite you all to come tomorrow to Bologna for our last day, even if you haven't participated in the workshop, to bring some of that theory into the conversation. So thank you.
I just remember to Italian language speaking that there is a translation available if you need it. It's just you can ask it. Scusate, volevo ricordare a chi parla italiano che se necessario c'è disponibile una traduzione, basta chiedere lì l'ingresso.
I will be very brief. The work that we were talking about in the summer school this past week, can you hear me? It's work that might be called medium design. I'm often looking at the urban world with half-closed eyes, seeing buildings with shapes and outlines, but also trying to focus on the medium or the matrix of rules and relationships in which all of those objects are suspended. So this kind of medium design could argue exists on the flip side of some dominant cultural logics, and on this flip side, nothing's new, nothing's right. You're kind of taking a hard pass on dramatic and emancipatory manifestations that would be said, and there's only a chance to rehearse a habit of mind that's been eclipsed. Blind spot that's right in front of us, the terra incognita where we've already been. So medium in our discussions is going back to the root medius, meaning middle or milieu. So on this flip side, maybe it's easier to see at a different focal length beyond some declared ideologies. Is a matrix or medium of activity of larger potentials, undeclared dispositions that are something like culture's muscle memory. And just as medium thinking inverts the typical focus on object and matrix, maybe it can offer some alternative approaches to intractable problems, bulletproof forms of power, maybe some way of outwitting the most cunning political superbugs. Sometimes it seems that there's nothing to counter the world's big bullies and bulletproof forms of power, only more ways of fighting and being right and providing the rancor that nourishes their violence. So it's a question, how do you design and represent that medium that makes some things possible and some things impossible, like a growth medium determines what will live or die, or like an operating system that sets up the rules of the game, that activate or link components in an organization. So unlike an object that's really easy for us to design, with a name, the declared ideology, it's often working with latent potentials and undeclared dispositions. So on this flip side, maybe there's a redoubled territory of operation with extra political and aesthetic capacities, but surely the expectations are inverted. For instance, on this flip side, being right is a really bad idea. It's too weak, doesn't work against gurus and totalitarian bullies. So maybe culture's spectacular failures inspire a different way to register the design imagination, sort of form making in another key or another part of speech, away from the nominative towards the infinitive. So these dispositions of space not manipulated with right answers or solutions or master plans, but with time-released active forms, multipliers, germs, switches, and mostly some kind of organ of interplay with an extended temporal dimension that's allowed to remain in play or unfold over time. So all of us designers are very good at making things with shapes and outlines, but this is less like making a thing and more like having your hands on the faders and toggles of organization. It's the design of interdependencies and chemistries and chain reactions, maybe benefits from an artistic curiosity with spatial wiring or reagents or spatial mixtures, not designing an object, but designing a platform for reflecting a population of objects, setting up different potentials within them, an artistic comfort with dynamic markers and unfinished processes. So it would be something like playing pool, where knowing one shot doesn't do you any good, but knowing, sort of like knowing you can't know the answer to playing pool, you can't know that, but you can know how to respond to a changing set of conditions. So, but how would you design, or more important to this panel, how do you represent something like an organ of interplay? For instance, usually we design things as built material, we add more stuff. But if one's thinking of interplay, one can even think of a political ecology, a spatial ecology, where you're subtracting, where you're taking away architecture and floodplains and distended suburbs and other places. Here's one example, and I want to give two. I think that's what Ron just asked you two. While roads are typically regarded as conduits of progress and opportunity, this happens to be the Amazonian rainforest in Ecuador, they deliver broadband and so on, but they can also erase the information that's imminent in cities and villages and landscapes. You all know these kinds of images very well, where space is an information system itself that's being erased. So here's a sort of, how do you represent these things? But here's a set of sort of cartoon diagrams that kind of a protocol that considers an interplay between broadband, roads, and forest or jungle. Asking if it might be productive to dial down roads, the gray lines, while dialing up broadband, the red radiating circle, and contracting so that you could allow for the expansion of farms and forests, the green information system, that also attracts more information-rich institutions that are broadband hungry. So trying to see how do you organize an interplay very different from the kinds of master plans that architects usually leave behind and dust off their hands. But also making the point that changing a road as well as changing a bit of code can impact telecommunications networks. These are drawings of heavy information systems. Or we would use a cartoon like this to talk about the subtraction of suburbia, or talk about the way that automated vehicles now, touted perfect driving if used in lieu of transit, create more congestion, or kind of smart vehicle in a dumb traffic jam. So we would use cartoons like this to try to show what happens when you drain cars away from the road with other kinds of spaces that are smarter forms of switching. And then here's a drawing, not my own, another example of a kind of multiplier designed for a concrete detail called pore form. It's just a concrete detail that through kind of biomimicry absorbs flood water. So the detail assumes all these different incarnations, but it's simple in some kind of this curb cut to a gathering space that's the size of the Tate Modern's turbine hall. But the designer is really designing an active form, not just a detail, but the way a detail spreads like a germ. The way a detail becomes a multiplier and eventually a network in a city. And then, of course, the most difficult problem is how these drawings have another kind of aesthetic seduction in culture that powerfully contacts cultural desire, again, to outwit the superbug.
While we are waiting to open the Neilson's file, I just want to remember that tomorrow the event in which will be presented the results of the workshop will be hosted at 7 o'clock at Checkpoint Charlie in Via Rosa Spina 7. And also want to say that on Friday, July the 5th, there is going to be the closing event of this summer school. Didier Fassin will present a lecture called "In the Shadow of the City: Planetary Urbanscapes." So this will be the closing event of the summer school. So you are all invited to join. It will be here, but in the garden downstairs. So yeah, we hope it will be a little bit more believable in terms of weather.
Thank you for having me. I wanted to present some of the things we have built and designed in the context of a project called Data Farms Circuits Labour Territory, which is a project that investigates three clusters of data centres. One of them is in the middle of Sydney in Australia. I'm just showing some of the iconic sort of structures involved in this site. The other one is in Jurong, the west side of the island of Singapore. This, for instance, is the Telling 3 data centre run by a subsidiary of Telekom Indonesia, providing information access to that archipelago that's significantly placed in Singapore, which has one of the largest clusters in the world. The other site that I will talk about more today is in Hong Kong. It's an area where I've spent quite a lot of time in the past 3 years. It's called Chung Kwan O. It's one of the largest data center clusters in the world. It's in the southeast New Territories of Hong Kong, so it's incredibly geographically proximate to Hong Kong Island and its financial district. But to get there, say, by train, you have to travel an hour right round through Kowloon and back around into the New Territories. There's quite a few interesting things about this particular space. One is that it's built on reclaimed land. So I think this whole question around reclamation is very potent, particularly in contemporary Asia. It's proximate to a major waste dump, so it raises questions, theoretical questions about the relation between data and waste, but it's also the site of large housing estates, like this one you can see in the image, which is called Lomas Park. We've done a lot of kind of so-called grounded research in these sites, things like asking the people who live in these buildings what they think are happening in the buildings across the road from them. Insofar as that goes, it's an interesting process, although I think a city like Hong Kong is one where it's often hard to find the ground. What the sense you have in this kind of space is that what appears to be the ground is a place that's desolate. It's not a social space. There are places on Hong Kong Island where you don't know where the ground is. The whole brouhaha around so-called volumetric urbanism is very present in this space. But what I wanted to show was a couple of things that we've built. One, I guess, could qualify as a visualization, and the other is a sonification. What we have done, apart from that kind of research process that I described, is also we hire space, we hire server space in these data centers, and we play around technically with that space that we've hired. So this cluster, Chung Kwan O, it's an important switch point between the Chinese internet and the internet as it exists in the rest of the world. Google was going to build a data center there, but they didn't. It's dotted with Chinese media and telecom companies who want access to the rest of the world, but also with all the big global information players who are seeking access to Chinese markets. We have hired a server from Aliyun, that's Alibaba Cloud, so from a big Chinese company. In this particular data center, which is the Towngas Telecom data center, it's one of the large ones in the cluster. And what we do is simply get this server to talk about itself. So if this will click through, bot that we installed on the server should start running. I'm not sure if this is that legible? No? Okay, I can read it out. It says, hello, I'm an agent running at the Lapini data center in Chumphano. Chumphano is located in the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region with its numerous cables and data centers as a key site. What would you like me to talk about? So then I can choose one of these, and the agent will talk to us about, I'm located in the Chumphano industrial estate, put up a little map. Google committed to constructing a data center here, but 2 years later they still haven't built anything. They surrendered the site, leaving a barren plot. This void was quickly filled up by large, nimble and deep-rooted mainland Chinese companies. It'll show you a picture of one of the data centers and so forth. So this is quite didactic, but it's simply working around the conceit that right now we're actually communicating with this server that we've hired in this particular facility. We can hit the next one, which will tell us about the cables that connect the site. Maybe it's legible now. So what will happen in this routine is that we'll recognize that it thinks we're in Vincenza. I don't know, maybe it's a server we're connected to here through the university. And then will tell us about the cables, the information that are being processed right now or running through. Okay, I'll need to go back to the PowerPoint. Something else that we've built is a sonification. It's been quite a complex and frustrating process, but basically it's it has to work in an installation space, which would look something like this. The center to the space is established. It's scanned with a handheld device such as a smartphone, and then that establishes various spaces, territories within the space. One is supposed to represent Singapore, the other one Hong Kong, and the other one Sydney, and users can move around in this space using alternative reality routines and listen to audio that's generated from a data model into which we fed quite a lot of data from publicly available databases such as the peering database, which contains information about peering relations between different autonomous computer systems. As you move through this space, and it's hard to give a sense of this in a sort of two-dimensional environment, on the phone, the events that are being generated that you hear are described in the log as on the phone. You can read as you move around and hear them in the space. So if I click on the next slide, maybe you can listen to a little bit of this. Maybe we can go back to the one you already had installed. Yeah. So just hit that. We've been working with a technician and a musician. They've been interested in building a form of data sonification that works musically, because a lot of the kind of stuff that's been done in this area is, it sounds like industrial music from the 80s, and you kind of listen to 10 seconds and you've already got it. So they wanted to do something that would hold people at least for a few minutes in an installation environment. There are, the data model generates a sonification based on various qualities associated with the event, but there's also some real-time data fed in from the so-called border gateway protocol, which lays on top of the two main audio tracks. This seems to have gone silent for some reason. Okay. So the idea is that it unfolds from events that are quite trivial, such as a school student, accessing a video, to critical events such as a flash crash or a cable cut, something of that nature. In presenting this sonification in a seminar on visualization, I don't think it's a hyper-critical move precisely because of this kind of crisis of ocular centricity that Niccolo was discussing. The very concept of visualization, I think, implies that something is primary with respect to the visual. If something is being visualized or sonified, and in this particular case, it's infrastructural relations surrounding the data economy. What do we learn from doing this kind of thing? I don't think it's very visible in the end product or in the representation. It's actually in the process of building it and in the kind of failures that you meet along the way, in the kind of tweaks that you have to do constantly just to get something like this running technically. So I would not say these are good visualizations, I would say they are failures. But I would say what we've learned in the context of the work we're doing is very much linked into that, into the kind of the politics and the aesthetics of that particular failure. Thank you.
I have no idea what's on here because they were selected according to some idiosyncratic algorithmic system where I didn't even look at the images, but sometimes things come at you so fast that you have to try to respond. So, can I slow it down? So one thing I'm very interested in is in terms of modalities of residency. What does it mean to be a resident of an urban space? And I'm struck by a long history of urban residency on the part of Africans and African Americans, which have always learned to live in a particular place without necessarily always being in that place, and being displaced to a scale of sort of extraplanetary travel. So this is in part reflected to a long history of Afrofuturism, and it's particularly relevant perhaps that in the era of climate crisis, when rich white people are going to try to jettison the Earth in terms of making their own extraplanetary travel, they will do so and find that black folk have already arrived. This is Amman, and one of the few cities of the world which still, within the urban core, houses significant swathe of lower and working class residents, largely self-constructed, it's a kind of iconic visualscape, but it is one of the residual sites for a form of suburban working class culture that's quickly disappearing in the urban core. But we don't know enough about it, and we should before it all disappears. This is from Jakarta, a way in which life is largely lived in public, even if the interactions between residents might be minimal, might be a kind of, on the level of a kind of parallel play. But in some ways, this becomes the kind of locus of a capacity for residents to witness each other, to learn from each other without having to sort of specify the terms through which this kind of learning and witnessing takes place. This is Bamako at Eid prayer, a kind of gathering, an important kind of gathering, important kind of affirmation of urban life. And what's interesting to me about this particular situation is that before the imam commences the prayer, he moves through each line and greets everyone, shakes everyone's hand, one by one by one by one, before he approaches the member to lead the prayer. So it's a gathering of which whose constituents are all, in some ways, acknowledged. This is also in Jakarta, and for me this is a kind of manifestation of a built environment of enduring incompleteness. It was built incomplete, it remains incomplete, and it's one of it's a highly prized residential place because of its incompletion. It's very difficult to find a place there. There's a lot of competition in order to be able to locate a living space there. And partly because it never intended to be finished. It doesn't announce a kind of point of arrival. It doesn't pretend to be a kind of destination. It exists to be messed with repeatedly. Okay, you know this. Usually auto-construction, self-constructed neighborhoods are associated with a particular look, a particular kind of image. This is a completely self-constructed, auto-constructed district in Yangon. So it doesn't look as if it's auto-constructed, but it completely has been built, self-built by the residents over a 25-year period. So the dissociation between what we understand as the self-built and particular images of that are oftentimes disjointed. This is China. This is Dar es Salaam. This is the construction of a new subsidy in Dar es Salaam, which also remains incomplete and probably will remain incomplete for decades to come, but it doesn't really matter because it's the pride of the city in that it's attempting to do something. And so it's a lot of money is built up in illuminating this particular kind of built environment. Eventually, it will become something. At this point, no one knows exactly what it will become because the destination has been reformulated countless times. But yet it is in some ways illuminated as the future of the city. This is an archive in Nehru Place in Delhi, where all kinds of secondhand equipment is stored, and people are encouraged to wander through the aisles and to pick and choose what they want in order to begin to create their own hybrid technical kinds of systems. So it is really a kind of library available for components that no longer maybe work, no longer have an original contextual rootedness, to become part of something else. And this is a Belt studio in Kingston. It's the studio of Lee Perry. Enough said about that. This is in Hyderabad. This is in some ways the district where people from all over India come to learn how to do the sort of algorithmic applications that are used to choose these pictures. These are from all kinds of software training to all kinds of, it's a center of learning, it's a center of higher education. And completely unregulated, completely schools come and go, but it shows you the kind of demand for these particular kinds of skills. This is Phnom Penh. And here, you can't see it, but here is a kind of a common outlay on the periphery of cities, rolling out, 40 square meter pavilions, endless replicated formats. This is the future, in some ways, of the urban periphery. It's a future that has a kind of limited temporal horizon, because many of these things won't last 10 years. But it is a particular manifestation of a particular mass-produced housing, and it is a kind of generic form, but politically it indicates in some way that this notion of the generic holds within it certain kinds of possibilities, certain kinds of political practices that we have yet to discover and yet to because within these areas are compressed a lot of different aspirations, a lot of different kinds of money, a lot of different kinds of histories, a lot of different kinds of trajectories. And it looks as if it's a kind of the homogenization of built form and residency, but yet it is oftentimes something else. Not always, but it's very difficult to tell. And this difficult to tell for sure posits certain kinds of possibilities in terms of how we build things and how we think about the built environment. I'll leave it with
that. So thanks a lot to everyone. We have time for discussion. So if there are comments or questions or something like that, feel free to ask. Just a preliminary consideration. When we start to reflect about this symposium, I mean, it's like a quite experimental way to discuss through images, and what I was curious about was how many people are going to be projected tonight, and the answer is almost no one. If you reflect upon all the images that we have seen from the workshop in the city or the other ones, there are no people in the visualization of contemporary urbanscapes, and that's not that's not strange. When we talk about the urban, we are talking precisely of the way in which modern ways of conceptualizing the city have divided the people from the city. The Latins used to have these two conceptions about the city, the urbs and the civitas, where the urbs refer to the morphology of the city, so the streets, the square, the edifices, and the civitas used to indicate, to point to the people, the cives. Modernity precisely divided these two conceptions that for the Romans were like inexplicable, were almost the same thing. It was not possible for the Romans to really separate urbs and civitas. Modernity precisely produced this break. The urban is precisely the city without the citizens. So I was not surprised about this, but I think that there is something that we should think about. How is it possible to imagine, to figure out new ways of thinking about cities from the perspective of the people? It's, I think, something that should interrogate us. I was quite stuck and surprised by the fact that the Bologna neighborhood, which is, I know that it was very hot, so maybe that's one reason why people were not in the street, but again, I think that there is something to think about when we reflect on new ways, alternative ways to visualize or to sonificating contemporary urbanscape. So just a reflection to open up the discussion. So again, please feel free to do comments or questions to our speakers. Or I don't know if you want to say something about this question about people and cheetahs and the wolves, or
some of these sites that I was showing are places that are quite inhospitable to people or residents or denizens, whatever we want to call them. Like in this Chunkwano data center cluster, I've read some internet chat routines that are still kind of extant with people talking about how they don't want their children to go down to the ground and run around at ground level because it's perceived as a kind of dangerous space. Doesn't seem too dangerous to me because it's completely empty. But there are certainly areas of this particular urban environment that are quite void at that level. So I think there's kind of there's clearly a kind of spatiality to the way in which this works as well. I guess one of the questions is how much do you need to have these kind of areas, or how much of the kinds of things that happen in these spaces necessary to, populate the forms of civic interaction that you have in other parts of the city. Do they nest into each other, or are they inextricably separated, as you suggest? Probably also the model of the civitas and the urbs is, it's heavily Western. So whether it's kind of functioning at a kind of global basis, and whether we can kind of wrestle those concepts from ancient Rome through to African cities or through to Asian cities, I think is really a kind of open question. And certainly one of the things that's at stake in the explosion of activity we've seen in Hong Kong in the last week is precisely whether those kinds of political concepts stemming from those traditions and the forms of liberalism they sustain can be sustained in the particular geopolitical environment in which the city finds itself.
And there are many different kinds of urban projects. So you know, what one is trying to do is document vast accumulations of power in big non-human apparatus. Then you know, there's not going to be people. Some other projects that we might be working on are about migration. There may be people that appear there, but I would never have the arrogance to choose those pictures. That has to be, in other words, the kind of representation that's set up so that people can appear within it has to be their choice. So it's very, very particular things. It's not just, oh, it would be nice if people appear in it.
I said this is a completely random selection, so I can't claim that what I'm about to say is informed by anything at all. I'm particularly interested in sort of representations of the urban that in some ways raise the question about what would this landscape be if it wasn't for us? If the urban was not in the service of any kind of self-furthering of human initiative or self-reflection or development. What if the urban simply was a kind of concatenation of rogue forces and rogue materialities that had nothing to do and were completely indifferent to what our ideas were, what our will was. And I think one has to sort of think about urban life through that kind of inversion to a certain extent in order to learn something about the game that we're involved in. And also to a certain extent that particular bodies are always already out of the frame in some way. There is a sensitivity. I mean, even though, I live in a city half of the year where there's like non-stop selfies every second, and everything has to be documented, and the human face and the image has to be documented in every conceivable kind of situation. There's also a kind of concern about not being framed, not being set up to take the fall, not being set up to be responsible, to commit too much to a particular kind of position, to be visible but always sort of already on your way outside of the frame and being the frame. And to me, this sort of depicts a kind of exigency of contemporary residency, particularly in the cities that I work in.
So many people, it's a question of how to be invisible, right?
Okay, if there are some questions or comments, please feel free to ask, or I can continue with some questions for our speakers. Okay, another round of questions is, what does it mean for you inhabiting contemporary urbanscapes? To continue this reflection about people and deeper about what does it mean, like inhabiting the digital space? What does it mean inhabiting like design spaces? What does it mean inhabiting new urban scenarios in the good so-called global south? What is changing nowadays? What are continuities between the past and now? So your reflections about inhabiting, is it linked today to territorial metrics? Is it more like linked to flows? Does it concern like a question of temporality? So just a couple of reflections about this. what does it mean today to inhabit contemporary urbanscapes? I know it's a hard question.
Well, I've just written a book on the uninhabited. So, that's where my head is at the moment. Again, that somehow, how do you experience processes of urbanization not as something to inhabit, not as something in which to stake a claim, not as a kind of locus through which one discovers a particular kind of position, or a particular kind of future, or invests in a particular kind of unfolding of oneself. There's something fundamental about the urban which cannot be inhabited. In fact, I think part of the definition of the urban resists, in some ways, the possibility of any kind of habitation. And then after all, there's the kind of political dimension that in order for the city to have been inhabited as a place of consolidation, as a place of development, as a place of progress, it depended upon relegating certain residents of that city to a position of uninhabitability. They could not stay there, they could not announce a set of lives, they could not be visible in any particular kind of way. And so I'm interested in these sort of dimensions of the urban, which is not a place of inhabitation, but rather something that is moved with, moved through in ways where it's difficult to have a clear vernacular as to where one is.
So many different kinds of urban projects. If one's thinking about working on one of the migration projects, then you're resisting the kind of remainders of national logics that only would characterize people in terms of inclusion and exclusion. There's no, it's not the, it's the right to inhabit the city is precarious, fragile. That's what so many of us are thinking about. From the kind of sort of vast non-human apparatus that are described as huge socio-technical networks that are designed only for a certain kind of manipulated trade and privileged capital, where labor is only a piece of equipment that's kind of imported and exported into it. How do you talk about habitation? Habitation sounds like kind of a gentle term, in that context. At the same time, some of the things that while one can work on these vast organizations, sometimes it comes down to a very particular place and trying to find situated values in very, very particular places. And often in those cases, whether you're looking at sort of the vacant lots of Cleveland or Flint or any extreme city in the world, you're looking for like the heavy, lumpy stuff, that space, that dirt, that house, and what can be made of that. What kinds of value exist when things have fallen off of real estate roles, when they exist in utter failure. And many of the projects we're working on, that's when we're absolutely rolling up our sleeves. It's like, great, it's failed. It's failed financially, it's underwater, literally and financially. Now we can work. Now we can trade on the actual physical situated values that are there instead of the financial abstractions that have been manipulating it so far. So that in that case, that might get closer to kind of another kind of possession or presence that sounds like
I don't think that inhabiting the contemporary urbanscape is anything like dwelling. I think in this notion I would try and bring out the habit in habitation. Moving through an urbanscape for many people means just kind of doing the same thing every day, and being in a very limited part of the city, or if they move across it, being in certain sort of obvious corridors of transport and communication and so forth. So habitation doesn't necessarily imply for me any form of social kind of plenitude or conviviality or all those kinds of things that, even kind of urban anonymity, that was at the roots of late 19th century sociological accounts of the city, doesn't carry any of that for me anymore or in any significant way. Samuel Beckett wrote in his book on Proust that habit is the chain that binds the dog to its vomit, but I don't think habit is even that anymore. And I think it's a political question in the contemporary urbanscape. How do we change habits? How do we move habits? How do we kind of pace them or time them or shift them slowly or quickly, drastically. These are things that are very hard to do, and they're not things that are happening within the existing kind of structures and scripts of urban governance. I think stemming precisely from such notions such as the Civitas.
So thanks a lot. If there are more questions, I just want to briefly present this event that will take place next year in Puebla, in Mexico. It's if you want, part of this reflection. It will be called Experiencing the City, Critical Fears and Visual Methods. It's promoted by the Academy of Global Humanities and Critical Theory, even if there is an error there. It's not Academy of Global History, Global Humanities and Critical Theory, the research collective into the black box, the Horizon 2020 project Plus, and the University of the L2 Mexican Universities in Puebla. It will be a 3 days event of workshops and lectures in which we will continue to reflect upon the questions we have raised tonight. So it is going to be public on the website of the Academy. There will be a call for papers, so if someone of you is interested in coming with us to Mexico next year, please join the event. So thanks to everyone for being with us tonight. I'll see you tomorrow at Checkpoint Charlie, and on Friday here for the DFSM lecture.